I was changing my son's diaper when I found the birthmark, a small, heart-shaped mark on his inner thigh that I'd somehow missed for 12 months. My heart wouldn't have stopped if I hadn't seen that exact same birthmark on another man, 6 hours earlier, when he approached me at the grocery store and asked if my son's name was Caleb. "DNA doesn't lie," Dr. Feldman said, sliding the results across his desk 3 weeks later. "The probability of paternity is 0%. The papers trembled in my hands. 1 year of nighttime feedings, of first smiles, of singing lullabies, until my throat was raw, all for a child who wasn't mine. "Are you certain?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. The birthmark had been my first clue, but there were others I'd been blind to. Caleb's olive complexion that matched neither my pale skin nor Emma's freckled fairness. His dark curls so unlike our straight hair. "I'm sorry, Mr. Collins." The doctor's voice was practiced, professional. How many men had sat in this chair before me, their worlds collapsing with each word? "These results are conclusive." I nodded, folded the paper, and tucked it into my jacket pocket. Then I drove home to the wife who had been lying to me for almost 2 years. Emma was playing with Caleb on our living room floor when I walked in, building a tower of blocks that he gleefully knocked down. Her laughter filled the room, the same laugh that had made me fall in love with her 5 years ago. The same laugh that now sounded like mockery. "You're home early," she said, looking up with a smile that froze when she saw my face. "What's wrong?" I took out the DNA results and dropped them on the coffee table. "I met Marcus Thompson 3 weeks ago. He has a heart-shaped birthmark on his thigh, exactly like Caleb's." The color drained from her face as she reached for the paper with trembling fingers. Caleb, oblivious to the devastation unfolding, knocked over another tower of blocks and clapped his hands. "Jason, I can explain," she began. "Explain what? That while you were supposedly on a girls' trip to Cancun 2 years ago, you were actually fucking some guy you met at a resort? That you came home, discovered you were pregnant, and let me believe the baby was mine? What exactly is there to explain, Emma?" She flinched at my words, then quickly gathered Caleb into her arms as if to shield him from my anger. "It wasn't like that. I made a terrible mistake, but I never meant to hurt you." "A mistake?" I laughed, the sound harsh even, to my own ears. "A mistake is forgetting to pay a bill or buying the wrong brand of coffee. This—" I gestured to Caleb, to the DNA results, to the shattered remnants of our life together. "This is a fucking catastrophe." Caleb began to whimper, sensing the tension in the room. Emma bounced him gently, murmuring soothing words into his hair. The tenderness of the gesture felt like a knife twisting in my gut. "How did he find us?" she asked quietly. "He moved here for work last month. Saw us at the park, recognized you and Caleb from the pictures on your Instagram." I shook my head, another piece of the puzzle clicking into place. "That's why you always insisted on posting photos where Caleb's birthmark wasn't visible, isn't it? You were afraid Marcus would see them." She didn't deny it. "What happens now?" Now I try to figure out how to unlove a child I thought was mine. Now I try to understand how the woman I trusted more than anyone could betray me so completely. I grabbed my keys from the counter. "I need some air." "Jason, please, we need to talk about this." But I was already out the door, unable to look at either of them without feeling like I was drowning. I drove aimlessly for hours, replaying every moment of the past 2 years in my mind. The night Emma told me she was pregnant, had she known then that the baby wasn't mine? The pregnancy she'd insisted was difficult when the doctor said everything was progressing normally. Had that been guilt manifesting as physical symptoms? The labor where she'd squeezed my hand and told me she couldn't do it without me, had that all been an act? My phone buzzed repeatedly with texts and calls from Emma, but I ignored them all. Instead, I found myself pulling into the parking lot of a bar I used to frequent before Caleb was born, before my life became a lie. 3 whiskeys later, I was no closer to figuring out what to do, but the sharp edges of my pain had dulled slightly. I pulled out my phone and, bypassing Emma's desperate messages, searched for Marcus Thompson on social media. He wasn't hard to find. His profile showed a good-looking man in his early 30s with dark curly hair and olive skin. I scrolled through his photos, noting the resemblance to Caleb in nearly everyone. How had I not seen it before? How had I been so willfully blind? There was a photo of him on a beach in Cancun from 2 years ago, right when Emma would have been there, and further back, evidence of the life he'd left behind when he moved here. A marketing job in Chicago, a condo with sleek, modern furniture, a chocolate Labrador named Duke. I was about to close the app when a more recent post caught my eye. A photo of Marcus with a woman, not Emma, and a smiling toddler girl on his shoulders. The caption read, "2 years with my beautiful girls. Never knew I could love this much." My stomach lurched. Did this woman know about Caleb? About Marcus's affair with my wife? Or was she, like me, living in blissful ignorance of her partner's betrayal? Before I could think better of it, I sent him a message. "We need to talk about Caleb." His response came almost immediately. "I was wondering when you'd reach out. Tomorrow, 10 a.m., Riverside Coffee." I agreed, paid my tab, and checked into a nearby hotel. I couldn't face going home, couldn't bear to look at the woman who had made a fool of me or the child I'd poured my love into, only to discover he was never mine to begin with. The next morning, nursing a hangover and running on barely 2 hours of sleep, I arrived at the coffee shop 15 minutes early. Marcus was already there, sitting at a corner table with 2 cups of coffee. "I got you black," he said as I approached. "Emma mentioned once that's how you take it." The casual reference to conversations about me made my jaw clench. "How long have you been in touch with my wife?" He had the decency to look uncomfortable. "Off and on since Cancun, more regularly in the past few months since I moved here." "And the woman in your photos? Does she know about your extracurricular activities?" Marcus frowned. "Alexis knows everything. She's actually the one who encouraged me to find Caleb once we realized we were in the same city." "How magnanimous of her," I said, the bitterness in my voice unmistakable. "Look, Jason, I can call you Jason?" He didn't wait for my response. "I never intended to disrupt your life. When Emma and I met, she was clear that she was married but having problems. We spent a week together, and then she went back to you. She told me she wanted to make her marriage work. And yet, here you are." He sighed. "I didn't know she was pregnant when she left. She contacted me about 6 months later, told me about Caleb, sent me a photo. By then, I'd met Alexis, and we were building something real. Emma and I agreed that telling you wouldn't benefit anyone." "Wouldn't benefit?" I cut myself off, aware that my voice had risen enough to draw looks from nearby tables. "You both decided, without my knowledge or consent, that I should raise another man's child believing he was mine. You don't see that as monumentally fucked up?" "I'm not saying it was right," Marcus said, spreading his hands in a placating gesture. "I'm just explaining how it happened." "And now what? Now that you've moved here and, accidentally, run into us, what exactly are you hoping for? Joint custody? Weekend visits?" His expression grew serious. "I want to know my son, yes, but I didn't seek you out to take Caleb away from you. I've seen how he looks at you, how you are with him. Biology aside, you're his father in every way that matters." The words hit me like a physical blow, because despite the rage and betrayal coursing through me, the truth was that I loved Caleb. I loved the way he reached for me when he was tired, the sound of his laughter when I tickled his belly, the weight of his small body against my chest as he fell asleep. The thought of losing him was almost as painful as the knowledge that he wasn't mine. "Your wife seemed amenable to finding an arrangement that works for everyone," Marcus continued, oblivious to my inner turmoil. "You've spoken to Emma since yesterday?" He nodded. "She called me last night after you left. She was distraught. Of course she was. Her carefully constructed house of cards was finally collapsing. So the two of you have been discussing my son behind my back." Again. I stood up, unable to stomach this conversation any longer. Tell me something, Marcus. That little girl in your photos, how would you feel if you found out tomorrow that she wasn't yours? That Alexis had been lying to you from day one? Would you be sitting calmly in a coffee shop discussing arrangements then? Without waiting for his answer, I walked out. Emma was waiting for me when I got home, her eyes red-rimmed and swollen. Caleb was nowhere to be seen. "He's at my mother's," she said, answering my unspoken question. "I thought we needed to talk without distractions." Distractions. I hung my keys on the hook by the door, a mundane action that felt surreal in the midst of this nightmare. "Is that what our son is to you? A distraction?" "Jason, please. I know you're angry. Angry doesn't begin to cover it, Emma. I'm fucking devastated. I thought we had a good marriage. I thought we were happy." "We were happy," she insisted, taking a step toward me. "We are happy." "No, we're not. Because our entire life together is built on a lie." I moved past her into the kitchen, needing to keep my hands busy. I filled the kettle and set it on the stove with more force than necessary. "When exactly were you planning to tell me the truth? On Caleb's 5th birthday? His 10th? Or were you just going to let me go on believing he was mine forever?" She sank into a chair at our kitchen table, the same table where we'd shared thousands of meals, where I'd once proposed on her birthday with a ring hidden in her dessert. "I don't know," she admitted quietly. "At first I convinced myself the baby was yours. We'd been together right before I left for Cancun." "Don't," I cut her off sharply. "Don't try to justify this by suggesting there was ever any doubt. You knew. The minute you saw that birthmark, you knew." She didn't deny it. "I was going to end the pregnancy," she whispered. "I made the appointment and everything. But then I thought about how much you wanted children, how excited you'd been when we talked about starting a family. And I couldn't do it. So instead, you decided to pass off another man's child as mine?" Christ, Emma. The kettle whistled, and I turned off the stove, no longer interested in tea. "You've been in contact with him this whole time." "Not consistently," she said quickly. "When I found out I was pregnant, I felt he had a right to know. And then, after Caleb was born, I sent him updates occasionally. Photos. And when he moved here? Was that a coincidence, or did you invite him?" Her hesitation told me everything. I needed to know. "I didn't ask him to move here," she said carefully. "But when he mentioned he was being transferred to the regional office, I didn't discourage him." "Because you're still in love with him." It wasn't a question. "No." Her denial was immediate and vehement. "What happened in Cancun? It was a mistake, Jason. We were going through that rough patch. You were so focused on the promotion, and I felt neglected. It's not an excuse, I know that. But it was just physical. It didn't mean anything. It meant enough for you to stay in touch. For 2 years. It meant enough for you to send him pictures of Caleb." I leaned against the counter, suddenly exhausted. "Does he want custody?" Emma bit her lip. "He wants to be involved in Caleb's life. He suggested a co-parenting arrangement." I laughed hollowly. "Of course he has, and you think I should just accept this? Play happy families with the man who fucked my wife?" "I think you love Caleb," she said softly. "And I think, despite everything, you still love me too." There it was, the crux of the matter, because she was right. Despite the rage and betrayal, despite the way she'd shattered every ounce of trust between us, some part of me still loved her. And I definitely loved Caleb. Biology be damned. "I need time," I said finally. "This is a lot to process." She nodded, relief evident in her expression. "Take all the time you need. I'll be here. We'll figure this out together." But as I walked out of the kitchen, I wasn't sure there was any way to figure this out. I wasn't sure our marriage, or my relationship with Caleb, could survive this revelation. That night I slept in our guest room, listening to Emma's muffled sobs through the wall. Around midnight, I heard her on the phone, her voice too low to make out the words. I didn't need to hear them to know who she was talking to. For the next week, we existed in a state of tense détente. Emma brought Caleb home from her mother's, and I found myself simultaneously drawn to him and afraid to get too close. Each time he toddled toward me with outstretched arms or fell asleep against my shoulder, the love I felt was tempered by the knowledge that somewhere across town, Marcus Thompson had an equal claim to these moments. I threw myself into work, taking on extra projects that kept me at the office late into the evening. Emma didn't complain about my absence, perhaps understanding that I needed the space, or perhaps relieved not to face my accusing stares. On Friday, I came home earlier than usual to find Emma and Marcus sitting at our kitchen table, Caleb playing, on the floor between them. The domesticity of the scene made my blood boil. "What the hell is this?" I demanded from the doorway. Emma jumped up, her expression guilty. "Jason, I didn't expect you for hours. We were just having a cozy family meeting in my house, without bothering to tell me." I moved further into the room, noticing the papers spread across the table. "What are these?" "Legal documents," Marcus said, standing as well. "Just outlining a potential custody arrangement." I grabbed the papers, scanning them quickly. Terms like joint legal custody and visitation schedule jumped out at me. "You've got to be kidding me." "It's just a first draft," Emma said hurriedly. "Nothing's been decided." "Nothing's been decided," I echoed. "Yet here you are, making plans behind my back. Again." I turned to Marcus. "Get out of my house." "Jason." "Now," I said, my voice dangerously low. "Before I do something we'll both regret." Marcus gathered his things, pausing briefly to touch Caleb's head before heading for the door. "This doesn't have to be adversarial," he said. "I'm not trying to take your place." "But you are," I cut him off. "That's exactly what you're doing. You're trying to take my son, my wife, my life. And the worst part is, you both think I should just accept it." After he left, Emma and I had the worst fight of our marriage. Words were hurled like weapons: her affair, my emotional distance before it happened, her lies, my recent absence. And by the end, we were both raw and bleeding. "I can't do this anymore," I said finally. "I can't live in this house with you, pretending everything is normal when it's so clearly broken." "So that's it? You're just giving up on us, on Caleb?" Her voice cracked on our son's name. "I'm not giving up on Caleb. But us, I don't know if there's anything left to save." I grabbed my keys and wallet. "I'll be at Ryan's. I need to figure out what I want." I spent the weekend at my best friend's apartment, alternating between rage, grief, and a deep, pervasive numbness. Ryan, to his credit, kept the beers coming, and didn't push me to talk until I was ready. "What are you going to do?" he asked finally, after I'd explained the whole sordid situation. "I don't know," I admitted. "Part of me wants to walk away from all of it, divorce Emma, let Marcus play daddy to Caleb, start over somewhere new. But I love that kid. I've been there for every moment of his life. He calls me Dada. How do I just leave him?" I took a long pull of my beer. "And then there's Emma. We've been together for 5 years, married for 3, that's not nothing. She cheated on you, man, and then lied about it for 2 years. I know." And I did know. The betrayal was massive, potentially unforgivable, but so was the thought of life without them. On Sunday afternoon, I returned home to find the house empty and a note from Emma on the kitchen counter. "Took Caleb to the park. Back by 4. Please be here when we get back. We need to talk." I used the time alone to really look at our home, the photos on the walls chronicling our life together, Caleb's toys scattered across the living room floor, the coffee mug Emma had bought me that proclaimed "World's Best Dad." The irony of that last one wasn't lost on me. When they returned, Caleb spotted me first, his face lighting up as he broke away from Emma's hand to run toward me on unsteady legs. "Dada!" I caught him instinctively, lifting him into the air as he squealed with delight. In that moment, looking into his trusting eyes, I realized something fundamental. DNA didn't make me his father. Love did. The late nights soothing his colic, the diaper changes, the first steps, the endless renditions of "The Wheels on the Bus." Those were the things that forged our bond, not some genetic connection. Emma watched us cautiously from the doorway. "You're back." "I'm back," I confirmed, setting Caleb down and watching as he toddled off toward his toys. "But things need to change, Emma. I can't just go back to how things were before." "I know." She moved into the kitchen, pouring herself a glass of water with trembling hands. "I've been doing a lot of thinking these past few days about what I want, about what's best for Caleb. And I want our family, Jason. You, me, and Caleb. But I understand if that's not possible anymore." She took a shaky breath. "I've told Marcus that I can't continue with the custody arrangement as planned, that I need to focus on trying to repair the damage I've done to our marriage." First, what did he say? He wasn't happy, but he understood surprisingly. Said he'd back off for now, give us space to figure things out. She hesitated. He also said that Caleb's lucky to have you as a father, regardless of biology. The words echoed what Marcus had told me in the coffee shop, and despite everything, I felt a grudging respect for the man. He could have pushed harder, could have taken legal action immediately, but he hadn't. "I can't promise I'll ever be able to trust you completely again," I told Emma honestly. "But I'm willing to try. For Caleb's sake, and maybe for ours too." Relief washed over her face. "That's all I'm asking for. A chance to prove that we're worth fighting for." We agreed to start marriage counseling immediately. We also agreed that we needed to establish some boundaries with Marcus. He could have occasional visits with Caleb, but they would be supervised and infrequent until we had worked through our own issues. The next few months were among the hardest of my life. 3 times a week in our therapist's office, Emma and I excavated the ruins of our marriage, examining where things had gone wrong long before the affair. We talked about my emotional unavailability during the months leading up to her trip, her resentment over carrying more than her share of the household responsibilities, the way we'd both stopped really seeing each other. None of it excused her betrayal, but it helped me understand it. And slowly, painfully, we began to rebuild something new from the ashes of what we'd lost. Marcus kept his word, maintaining a respectful distance while we worked on our marriage. When Caleb turned 18 months old, we agreed to let him visit, once a month. The first time I watched my son, because biology be damned, Caleb was my son, interact with his biological father was excruciating. But Caleb's obvious delight at having another person to play with, to shower him with affection, made it bearable. "He has your eyes," Marcus commented during one such visit, watching as Caleb identified animals in his picture book. "And your hair," I replied, surprising myself with the lack of bitterness in the observation. Marcus nodded, a small smile playing at his lips. "But that stubborn streak, that's all Emma." We shared a laugh, tentative but genuine, and for the first time, I could envision a future where this arrangement might actually work. As Caleb grew from a toddler into a little boy, our unconventional family dynamic evolved. Marcus married Alexis, and they had a child of their own, a sister for Caleb, who adored her from the moment he met her. Emma and I had our own daughter 2 years later, strengthening our recommitment to each other. There were challenges, of course. Explaining to Caleb, when he was old enough to understand, that Marcus was his biological father while I was the dad who had raised him. Fielding questions from well-meaning but intrusive relatives about why Caleb looked so different from his sister, navigating holidays and school events to ensure everyone felt included without overwhelming Caleb with too many parental figures. But for each challenge, there was a moment of grace. Caleb's declaration at 6 years old that he was lucky because he had 2 dads who love me instead of just one. The look of absolute trust on his face when he came to me, not Marcus, after falling off his bike and scraping his knee. the Father's Day card he made that proclaimed me the best dad, even if we don't match. On Caleb's 7th birthday, as I watched him blow out the candles on his cake, surrounded by his extended family, including Marcus, Alexis, and their daughter, I felt a wave of gratitude so intense it nearly brought me to my knees. This child, conceived in betrayal and raised in complexity, had brought more love into my life than I'd ever thought possible. Later that night, after the guests had left and the children were in bed, Emma found me sitting on our back porch, nursing a beer and looking at the stars. "Penny for your thoughts," she said, sliding into the chair beside mine. "I was just thinking about how differently things could have turned out," I admitted. "If I hadn't seen that birthmark, if Marcus hadn't moved here, if we hadn't decided to try again." She reached for my hand, her fingers threading through mine. "Do you regret it? Staying?" I turned to look at her. This woman who had broken my heart and then, with time and effort and endless patience, helped me piece it back together. "Not for a second," I said, and meant it. The path to forgiveness had been long and grueling, with setbacks and moments of doubt. There were still days when the old pain resurfaced, when I looked at Caleb and saw the evidence of Emma's betrayal rather than the miracle of our family. But those days grew fewer as time passed, replaced by a deeper understanding of what it truly means to be a father. Not the man who contributes DNA, but the one who shows up, the one who teaches and guides and loves, even when, especially when, it's difficult. "Do you think he knows?" Emma asked softly. "How much you love him?" I thought about Caleb's face earlier that day, alight with joy as he opened the science kit I'd bought him, the one he'd been hinting about for months. I thought about the way he'd thrown his arms around my neck, whispered, "Thanks, Dad," in my ear like it was a secret between just the two of us. "Yeah," I said, squeezing Emma's hand. "I think he does." And in the end, that was what mattered. Not the circumstances of his birth, or the crisis that had nearly torn our family apart, but the love we'd managed to salvage and strengthen through it all. I had started this journey as a man betrayed, a father in name only. But somewhere along the way I had become something more, a father by choice, by commitment, by love. Father of the year? Hardly. But father of Caleb? Absolutely. And that, I'd finally learned, was enough.